Roberts was bewitched by David Handley. David Handley, 1822 to 1886, of Malden, was the primary supporter and co-leader alongside Edward Turney in a doctrinal conflict that shook early Christadelphian identity. Together they published the influential 8-page pamphlet 32 Questions and Answers Concerning Jesus Christ, which challenged the developing atonement framework associated with Robert Roberts. Their intervention forced a re-examination of whether Adamic nature itself was altered at the fall, or whether death was already inherent in the created order. This document argues that Robert Roberts was decisively influenced, bewitched in doctrinal direction, by Handley's line of reasoning, leading him away from the earlier teaching of Dr. John Thomas and toward what later became known as the clean flesh theory in modified form. Dr. Thomas's original position, 1855, mortal nature, moral fall. Dr. Thomas's 1855 teaching is explicit. The fall is moral, not physical, in the sense of altering Adam's constitution into a new death nature. Instead, Adam and Eve were already part of a structured animal system governed by cycles of life and decay. He writes, open quote, "Death and corruption then, with reproduction, the characteristic of spring and summer, is the fundamental law of the physical system of the 6 days." Close quote. This is a foundational statement. Death is not introduced by Adam's sin. It is already embedded in the natural order. Dr. Thomas continues, open quote, "Adam and Eve and all the other animals born of the earth with themselves would have died and gone to corruption if there had been no transgression." Close quote. This establishes the key principle. Mortality already exists in the biological system. The moral dimension of the fall is therefore about interrupted access to life, not a transformation from immortality into mortality. He further clarifies, open quote, "The death principle was an essential property of their nature, but as they did not die till after their transgression, death did not enter in till after that event." Close quote. The logic is precise. Death is inherent, but not activated in outcome until sin introduces legal moral consequences. Thus, in Dr. Thomas's framework, Adam is mortal by creation. The fall is moral, not ontological. No change of biological constitution occurs. 2. The pre-1873 Christadelphian position. Roberts initially agrees. Early Robert Roberts' writings follow Dr. Thomas closely. He affirms, Adam is mortal. The fall is moral, not physical. Death already belongs to animal existence. Redemption is about deliverance, not repair of altered flesh. In this phase, Roberts aligns with the principle that the very good creation includes mortality as part of its structure. Dr. Thomas states, open quote, "The natural system was the same the day before the fall as the day after." Close quote. This eliminates any idea of a biological downgrade at Eden. At this stage, Roberts does not yet teach that Adam's nature became condemned flesh through the fall. That development emerges later. Number 3, David Handley and Edward Turney. The turning pressure, David Handley, together with Edward Turney, challenged the atonement implications of Roberts' developing framework. Their pamphlet, 32 Questions and Answers Concerning Jesus Christ, pressed a critical issue. If Adam's nature was not changed, why does Christ need to assume a specially condemned nature to redeem it? Their argument direction was simple but powerful. If death is already inherent, then Christ's flesh must be of a different legal category. Therefore, Adamic nature becomes redefined as condemned after the fall. This creates a distinct theological category of sin in the flesh. This pressure forced Roberts toward a new synthesis, maintaining Dr. Thomas's mortality framework while introducing a post-fall condemned nature concept. This is the point at which Roberts' doctrinal trajectory shifts. 4. The shift after 1873. From mortality to clean flesh conflict. After 1873, Roberts increasingly articulates a dual-layer anthropology. 1. Adam was created mortal. 2. After sin, Adam's nature became condemned. 3. This condemnation is transmitted physically to descendants. This produces a tension with Dr. Thomas's earlier position, because it introduces a change in nature where Thomas explicitly denied one. Roberts writes, open quote, "That Adam broke this law and was adjudged unworthy of immortality and sentenced to return to the ground, a sentence which defiled and became a physical law of his being." Close quote. This is a decisive shift. The sentence is no longer merely legal or moral. It becomes physically transmitted defilement. This is precisely the doctrinal movement that aligns with Handley's pressure point, the need to locate sin not only in moral disobedience, but in inherited flesh condition. Number 5. The visible hand of God doctrine. Roberts further intensifies the shift by framing Adamic death as divinely instituted in a new legal physical sense. Open quote. The whole incident of the entrance of death into the world by Adam's disobedience may be considered as the next exhibition of the visible hand of God in human affairs. Close quote. Here, death is no longer simply part of natural biology. It becomes a post-event divine constitution. He continues, open quote, it has become quite unfashionable to suppose that death entered into the world at that time. Close quote. This indicates Roberts is defending a controversial reconfiguration of earlier teaching. The key transformation is this. Earlier, death is natural and pre-existing. Later, death is a specific divine imposition triggered by Adam man. This is the doctrinal pivot influenced by the Handley-Turney controversy. The core doctrinal conflict. The tension can be summarized as follows. Dr. Thomas, original position. Death is built into creation. Adam is mortal by design. The fall is moral, not biological. No change in Adam's physical nature. Roberts after Handley influence. Death becomes legally imposed after sin. Adam's nature becomes defiled. This defilement is inherited biologically. Christ must assume this condemned nature. The contradiction is structural. Roberts attempts to hold both mortality as creation and condemnation as physical change simultaneously. Number 7. The clean flesh trajectory. The emerging doctrine, later known as clean flesh, develops from this tension. If Christ is to redeem Adamic nature, then Christ must share that same condemned nature, yet remain personally sinless. This requires redefining sin as a physical condition, not just moral act, flesh as legally defiled substance, nature as transmissible condemnation. But this is not Dr. Thomas's framework. It is a later synthesis shaped by controversy. Number 8, assessment of the doctrinal shift. The decisive issue is not whether Roberts was sincere, but whether the shift represents continuity or transformation. Evidence from the text shows Dr. Thomas denies ontological change at the fall. Roberts later affirms a transmitted defilement. Handley's pamphlet forces a sharper distinction between Adamic flesh and Christ's flesh. Thus, the trajectory is not static development, but conceptual restructuring. The introduction of physical law of defilement marks the key break from the earlier mortality-only model. Modern 9. Conclusion. Bewitched as doctrinal reorientation. The claim that Robert Roberts was bewitched by David Handley is not a personal accusation, but a description of doctrinal influence and redirection. The evidence shows. Pre-1873, Roberts follows Dr. Thomas, mortality without altered nature. Post-controversy, Roberts adopts inherited condemnation language. Handley and Turney's challenge forces a redefinition of Adamic nature. The result is the emergence of a hybrid system combining mortality and physical condemnation. Dr. Thomas's original position remains internally consistent. Adam is mortal, and the fall is moral. The later Roberts framework introduces a second layer, a transmitted legal physical defilement of nature, absent in the earlier teaching. In this sense, the doctrinal shift is not merely refinement, but reconfiguration under external theological pressure. The trajectory of change can therefore be traced directly through the controversy initiated by Handley and Turney, marking one of the most significant turning points in early Christadelphian doctrinal development.